All right, recording in progress, people. All right, are we ready?
Got it.
I'm ready.
All right, Rage of Aquarius episode. Is this episode 1 or is this episode 0?
0.
Okay, it's kind of episode 0. It's kind of like an awkward first date. The first
Well,
podcast.
yeah, zeros are great though, because it's like what's going to step into it, right?
Yeah,
Like Sumo definition of where the fighters go.
yeah.
Yeah.
It revolutionized mathematics, right?
Mhm.
The invention of the zero.
Yes. Well, should we just introduce ourselves, or
Well, I think so. I think so.
if
If
you're
that's,
kicking it off, go ahead there.
yeah. I mean, this, like I said, it's like anytime you listen to these, early podcast episodes before the hosts like really get their sea legs, there's always this kind of like awkward, like throat clearing,
Mhm.
So yeah, let's just get into it. What do we have on the docket, Rachel?
Well, my name is Rachel, and I write astrology for a living under the name Alien Heart. And this is my husband, Andrei,
Hello.
who is my partner in crime and my artistic collaborator. And we've been married for 5 years now, and we've been together for nearly 20, which is really scary. And this is our good friend, Frederick Woodruff, who I've been a huge fan of for many years now. So it is such an exciting opportunity to actually get to have an ongoing dialogue with you, Frederick. Welcome.
Well, yeah, and back at both of you. I mean, this really, I think, is comes from the first time that we met and did a couple podcasts in the past, and then COVID happened, and then I think things got kind of waylaid, at least in my mind, of wanting to bring something back together with the three of us.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm Frederick. Longtime astrologer, have a Substack, and I guess everyone's web thing will be listed beneath this wherever it's posting, so people can check out our sites or newsletters. And yeah, the reason I wanted to work with you guys was the first podcast that we did. It just had such a refreshing tenor to me, and it seemed like we all had something in common in the particular angle or approach that we take to astrology. And I think that's part of the Rage of Aquarius subtitle is
Outsider Astrology.
Outsider Astrology and astrologers. So the listener will hear more about that as we go. Unless someone wants to elaborate more on that,
Well, I have been really happy as an astrologer. It's the only job or career path that I've ever had that I found deeply fulfilling and fun. I did a lot of things before in education, and I loved teaching and I loved children, but working within that system was always anathema to my spirit and soul, and it was crushing, suffocating, and really difficult in terms of the way that it stepped on my toes ethically, philosophically. It was really hard. So I have experienced the role of outsider in so many ways throughout my life. And then when I became an astrologer, I found it to be the most free, liberating, creative experience. But in my naivete, I didn't quite realize how much of a scene astrology really is. And so after a few years of being an astrologer, I discovered that even within this liberating, creative, Iranian sector of life, I still felt like I was on the outside of a scene, and that's where I choose to be. I really like being eclectic. I like being able to use a lot of different styles, and I really don't have a style or a school or a formal intention with this work. I find it to be really restrictive to do so, and therefore as far as where I'm coming from as an astrologer, it's quite eclectic, it's quite wide open, and therefore I feel like an outsider even in the astrological world. So
Right.
that's
Well,
why I connect to the title.
yeah, and that goes back to like why I felt resonance with you guys when we connected, because there was that kind of open-ended approach and not working a particular angle or school or whatever. And anyone that reads my writing and stuff knows that I kind of talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
Like the freedom to be an artist as an astrologer. And
Yes.
that connotes, right?
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, that's what Andre's actually the one that found you, Frederick. So thank you, Andre.
Yeah,
You know.
you're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Is that that time I recommended pens and you saw?
Oh, that was one of the things. No, it was just, like it's just Facebook feed. Just becomes like it's like this like hyper dynamic television static. And like, and eventually like, it's like the more interesting images kind of start and you're like, oh, I think, is this the, is this the Spice Channel, or is this, am I looking at the Spice Channel, or am I looking at MTV, But eventually, like, real personalities emerge. And I don't know how. I think it was just at a time when I was like working at some new age blog, and I would just go into these Facebook groups and I would just add every single person in the group so that I could, spam them with blog posts. And and Frederick was one of the people that ended up on my friends list. And it's just most people on your friends list aren't that interesting. Most people aren't that interesting. I mean, everybody's interesting. Everybody's like a universe unto themselves, but most people really aren't that interesting. And but I'd always see his posts, and they always had these great, great music recommendations and great film recommendations and great, and great. And that was the pen thing. Was I was like, oh, I'm gonna try it out. I was like, oh wow, this guy's he's even got his pen game all like dialed in,
Crazy.
Yeah, but you notice people who are posting about like Bowie and Polya and stuff like that, and actually have a very sharp and developed appreciation for art and aesthetics, over people who are just kind of like out there parroting the kind of the whatever the de rigueur like hashtag political cause is that week, so at least I do. It's all subjective, I guess. If that is what you find interesting, then this conversation probably won't be very interesting. So
so then let's talk about like Rachel's title for this, Rage of Aquarius, which is just a scream, which means I love it. Let's talk like the people watching or listening, like what can they expect, or what's going to be a good reason for them to tune in to us each time we go up and do our thing.
Oh, the title, I mean, in some ways, it just came to me, and it's catchy, and it sounded like something that had to be created. And so the meaning I had to reflect on, and I'm still reflecting on it after the inspiration came. So I'm not even entirely sure right now what Rage of Aquarius means, but as far as I've reflected on, I feel like there is in this time, which there's a lot of debate about whether or not we're in the official Aquarian age or not. I'm not actually sure. I'm not, determined to declare that it's the Aquarian age, but it most definitely is an Aquarian era. There's a tremendous amount of Aquarian influence in this time due to the great conjunction that happened on the solstice in 2020. The influence of Pluto in Aquarius that's coming up next year, and the current transit of Saturn through Aquarius. So whatever way you slice it, the sign of Aquarius and all of its influences and themes is very important right now. And
Yeah, and I would add just real quick, like
yeah.
I think Pluto on the verge of Aquarius, certainly once it gets in there, there will be a rage.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And
You
I can
know,
feel it.
I
I can
mean,
feel it.
yeah, just as a vibe shift. And I think with Pluto, the uh, punch that it packs wherever it's traversing. So that's kind of, we're a little ahead of the curve with the title, but I think that fits too.
I feel like the rage is it's a lot of things. Number one, there's a tremendous sense of, I think, collective alienation and also disappointment.
Mm,
A
mhm.
lot of promises have been made in terms of the collective utopian dreams.
Mhm.
And a lot of dystopian nightmares are on the horizon, or are present and imminent at this moment. So there's a lot of collective crisis, existential crisis, a feeling of tremendous alienation. I think one of the issues that we have with information technology, as wonderful as it is, being connected and being able to learn anything that we want in an instant, one of the dark sides of that is the echo chamber that we get trapped in, the ideological conformity that this technological hive mind has imposed upon us. And it's inhuman and unnatural to be coerced and forced into conformity and uniform ideology and monotone, monochrome, monotonous culture and
Mhm.
ideas. And so I feel like the tremendous amount of rage that's in everybody at some level right now comes from the resentment of being, you know, herded and manipulated and constantly shoved into conformity that is
Right.
against our very nature. So
Well, sure. And then Leo being opposite Aquarius, which the whole solar principle with that sign and the individual
yeah,
versus the mass tech hive mind, I think that unleashes some rage.
yeah,
Because everything is suddenly about one world. This whole the first thing I think of is the nightmares of this metaverse thing. Like,
yeah,
just to me, talk about outrage. I mean,
yeah,
Yeah.
you know, that's for another show, maybe.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so,
I,
yeah.
yeah,
Go
I was just gonna say there's actually a lot of there's Saturn's transit through Aquarius over the last like 120 years has corresponded to some major breakthroughs in mass media and big tech and propaganda that we could explore.
right.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So, I want this to be an ongoing dialogue that is cathartic for anybody who feels this rage that is sometimes very nebulous, sometimes very unconscious, sometimes so gigantic and global and existential that we have no way to process it. And I also believe that a lot of this rage offers a tremendous amount of creative potential,
Mhm.
because I really do believe I'm a Sagittarius rising. I have a lot of Sagittarius in my chart, and I have a still like indomitable naivete and optimism about the human spirit overcoming all challenges. And
Right.
even though we're under a tremendous amount of duress right now, I also do believe that it is evolutionary pressure always that stimulates the growth of new abilities, new, thorns, claws, teeth, fur, whatever you need to support your ability to thrive in whatever environment you are thrust into. It's granted by nature. And so this is something that I'm also interested in observing, is how the pressures that we're being put under are evolving, are summoning a tremendous amount of evolutionary strength. So I'm not entirely dystopian. I'm not totally black pilled. I do feel melancholic a lot of the time about things, but I also feel like a lot of the anger has a tremendous amount of creative potential, like I said. So that's the kind of conversation that I want to unfold in this podcast. We're having like a meta conversation about Aquarius and its themes, the way that it feels to be human in this time. And there'll be lots of little, details that we weave into each episode. A lot of different themes that we can uncover. And
Cloud.
Got it.
And for me, one of the most important things about an ongoing conversation that centers on astrology is that it's not just about astrology. It's actually using astrology as a lens to examine all the things that we find interesting, which include history and philosophy and art, culture in general. Because for me, I don't actually like astrology unless it's being used to examine something else. So for me, it's like astrology is a tool, it's a language that evokes so much of what we want to be able to discuss and describe about the mythopoeic, symbolic side of life, the deeply psychological, or, the aesthetic side of life. So that's why I was such a fan of your work, Frederick, because when I bought your book, Skywriter,
Yeah.
several years ago after Andrei recommended you, I was so excited because I was like, finally, I found somebody cool that's not just writing about astrology. Your writing was about a lot of different things, and it was very interesting. It was thought-provoking, it was philosophical, and that's what I love about astrology. So that's what we're going to be doing on this podcast.
Great. Well put. Excellent. Yes.
And let's see. Okay, so moving on.
We can't do anything without the docket.
I'm a Virgo.
We can't move forward.
I made a list.
I'm
I
sitting
think
here. I'm like,
it's
where is the outline?
Yeah.
What do we do?
Okay.
Hold on. I'm gonna get back to my regular screen. Suddenly I got giant here.
Oh yeah,
How's that?
that's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I actually have a question for you, Frederick. I'm curious because you've been an astrologer since the 70s, as I recall from your biography. You started doing this as a very young man, like a teenager, actually.
Yeah, 13. Yeah.
Amazing. And, so you're a veteran, you know what you're doing. This is something that you are a pro at. And yet you feel you resonate with this kind of outsider perspective or this outsider status. Why is that? Why are you not the biggest insider since you're, such a pro and you've been doing this for so long?
I guess a quick answer to that is I don't like, or I prefer things that are open-ended. And so attaching myself to or perching somewhere and then, building off of that, this edifice of me, the astrologer. I don't know. I think it's because I find people that do that tiresome. I try to avoid it myself. So I'm just always trying to stay open-ended and expanding and open. It's why I don't really do good in group things or like organizational things or,
Yeah.
I used to go to the conferences and things like that. And I just didn't jive with it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Uranus is on my ascendant. That's probably a big part of it.
Yeah, me too.
You look at it through that lens, yeah.
Oh my gosh, isn't that interesting?
But then Andrei kind of fits in that too, because we were talking earlier, you're not really like an astrologer.
No, I do not consider myself an astrologer. Like I said, it's like what I said is it's like it's in my esoteric bug bag. It's like like you're out, we're kind of like in this like spiritual wilderness, and it helps me navigate where I'm my way through the tundra, so to speak. But yeah, I don't necessarily consider myself an astrologer, but it's something I'm what I tell people. It's like that line in Pulp Fiction where Samuel L. Jackson says, "My girlfriend's a vegetarian," which pretty much makes me a vegetarian. So my wife's an astrologer, which pretty much makes me an astrologer.
Got it.
So but yeah, I don't necessarily consider myself an astrologer per se. I had a very similar experience that you just explained, where I've been in groups of these of you people, and it's just it was always just this like I can't really enter the conversation. The conversation feels very unnatural because it feels like, because it's all these astrologers together, they feel that they have to come together to talk astrology, and they're not necessarily talking about, I don't know, TV shows or sports or just kind of like that, or the weather, even the actual weather, that it just felt very stiff and very, very awkward. No offense to anybody, and I'm not calling out any individual soul, but it didn't really it kind of reminded me of the story when Lester Crowley was he was going to be he was going to be like the next Bobby Fischer before he was the wickedest man in the world. He was actually he was competing to become a chess grandmaster, and he walked into the competition and he just saw these these like really neurotic kind of savant nerd types that just were obsessed with chess and nothing but chess. And he left, he walked out to go climb and went on and like booked a flight on an expedition to go climb the Himalayas. And it was just there, he just had this kind of moment where he like saw them all like like crouched over the board, and it just gave him the chills, and he just said, I couldn't do it. I really couldn't get deeper into this world.
Yeah, it reminds me of a friend of mine that he thought he wanted to be a physicist, so he did all the preambles and this and that, and then got into rooms with actual physicists, and he just said their eggheady approach and this limited sort of laser beaming into mathematics or what, he just said God, he just couldn't do it.
Yeah,
And he went off into metaphysics, actually, which gave a lot more, I guess, latitude, for him.
Yeah. There we go. It's an analogous tale.
What do you guys like? Who's our audience? Like, for the people listening to this, how are they going to determine, like, oh yeah, I want to hear more from these folks?
Who's our ideal client avatar?
Well, who's driving? Like, what do we say to them, or like what? That's like, what's in it for them?
I would like to appeal. I would like to. I was just listening to a Bill Hicks record the other day, and he has the bit. One of his bits was the people who hate people party, or people who've always my magical motto for some time before I realized it was like really attracting nothing but disastrous magical groups that I was highly toxic magic circles to work in was Groucho Marx's. I would never want to belong to a club that would have someone like me for a member, but it's just, people who've never, who've always been drawn to the metaphysical, the esoteric, but have felt a certain amount of alienation from it based on, the kind of, the over technicality, the egg-headedness, the kind of the you know what it's like when you go to a a class at a metaphysical bookstore, and you just really don't fit in with these people, and it feels a little and you're like, I don't want to be mean because this is their scene, and this is their, a lot of, they really need this, but it's the only place in town where there's an astrology class, or it's something
Right. Well,
like
that's
that.
the catch-22 for like outsider types, or I don't know what, renegades or outlaws, is
Yeah.
that you do. Well, I mean, I remember having, to go to school, when I was with Ivy Jacobson and my teacher Margaret, and going to the groups and the occult bookstores, and hey, I think that's a rite of passage,
Mm-hmm.
somebody to develop the lexicon and things like that. I think the problem is when the lexicon starts to suffocate the free thinking of the
Yeah.
person. And I think to be a good astrologer, you really do have to have sort of a wild card part of your nature. The mercurial part needs to be mercurial, and right,
Yeah.
not
Free-floating.
have to be locked into like a certain mode, because people are fluid creatures,
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's who I think of as our audience, is just people who crave a more immersive experience of astrology rather than having to use it to as like a metaphysical personality test, or to make very dry predictions, something that actually opens up the use of the language so that more connections can be made, so that the symbolic side of consciousness can be nurtured and cultivated and inspired. That's what I think our audience is. People
Great
who
way
want
to put
to
it.
talk
Yeah.
about astrology outside of horoscopes, love matches, and predictions that are 90% of the time wrong, or too general to be of any use.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that you can learn a lot about astrology just from conversations like these, reading articles that make a lot of connections, that synthesize a lot, listening to more fluid, immersive conversations. I think that's the best way to actually make astrology real, which is one of the themes that you always write about. I think there was an essay on astrology as a real experience in the book that I bought years ago, and you just published a recent blog post
Yeah.
about
That
I feel
piece.
like that's our audience, people who want that and who know that that's true, that this is a very personal experience. It's a personal dialogue that you have with creation. It's a
Right.
very subjective experience, kind of like the ecology of spirit and soul. It's just an incredible, deep, rich array of concepts, ideas, metaphors, symbols that really open you up to a richer experience of life, internally and externally.
Right.
So that's what I think people crave. And who is open to this kind of conversation? Artists, obviously. Our audience is probably going to largely be artists.
I think that's really it.
Yeah.
It's just it's the, like you said, when the lexicon becomes overbearing, or when the this when the when the paint over we when the color theory overwhelms the actual painting,
Right.
and instead it's people who could actually see that astrology, things like astrology and tarot, these are colors on the palette.
Yeah.
These are words in a language that can actually be used to tell a story, to paint a portrait. But when the lexicon becomes overbearing, the message becomes unclear. and it's we want to attract those who seek to use these tools in a way that is natural and flowing and organic, and fits into a greater structure that does incorporate, the arts and the sciences and other multidisciplinary framework.
Yeah. But as I tell people often, I mean, we're basically all artists, really, because we're here on the planet and having to maneuver this thing called life. And to do that, you do need to understand creativity. So, I mean, it could be a painter, a gardener, a chef, a homemaker, a physicist. I think it's all some expression of art. So really, it's open to everybody that is connected to that mode of, willing to think outside of the box and be inspired or led or guided by something other than the ego. Because I think really good art, to me at least, I can see that the artist, say, looking in a very general way, like somebody's done a painting, and I don't know what it is about it, but I can tell instantly if the artist's ego is actually out of the way, right? And then the piece seems to have its own identity in life, rather than somebody applying all the rules, and I learn how to put the shadows in here, and that means this has to have this color gray, and nothing wrong with that, because again, that's how we all start. We learn the rules, the lexicon, and then, like I said in that piece, Rachel was referencing about astrology as a real experience. There comes a jumping off point, and then you're like, okay, I got all this. Okay, now I'm gonna jump. Don't know where exactly, but it's time to jump. And I think that's who I hope we're attracting as an audience here, and that we get dialogue with, because I'd love, I don't know, in the comments or however this is getting structured on YouTube or Substack or all over the place, people to let us know what they want us to talk about or explore, or suggestions they have, that they're offering. Like, God, go down this alleyway. I'd love to see what you guys say about that. So really welcoming the listener, viewer to jump in.
Yeah. I would love that as well.
So let's talk about, because you brought up predictions.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people, when they tune into astrology shows, it's like the new moon in Gemini, and it's going to be like, get out there and use your coupons at the market. So like, let's talk about predictions and stuff.
Okay.
Like what we're doing and not doing with that. What do you think of that?
Where to begin? Yeah, I think that's really, really important, because it's what everyone thinks astrology is: fortune telling, essentially, and it is a form of divination. There is a divinatory process that is at play when you are looking at weather patterns and cycles, and you're looking into the past and then projecting your imagination onto the future. You don't need astrology to do that. You do that every time you read history. You do that when you think about what happened last time you went to that store. There's nothing strange or unnatural about divination, using your imagination to understand time that's beyond the present. But astrology has like a ridiculous reputation because of the overemphasis on prediction. And it begins at like the microcosmic level with, the horoscopes in the back of the newspaper, which offer like very heavy-handed advice. I mean, there are no newspapers anymore, but
sure,
I'm being hyperbolic, I guess, but like the heavy-handed horoscopes that tell you what kind of day you're going to have, what you should and shouldn't do. And these are, they're fun. Like fortune cookies are fun. We all enjoy this kind of thing. It's titillating. It's fun.
Right.
But it's also, it makes, you vulnerable. As in the work that we do, it makes you very vulnerable to ridicule, and rightfully so, because it's also ridiculous. It's also kind of unwise at a lot of levels to try and coerce people to believe that you can see what the future holds with certainty. Like meteorologists have a good idea of the weather patterns that are emerging, but they can't be certain how hard a storm is going to hit,
Right.
what it's going to destroy or not destroy. They also can't tell you what your internal experience of the storm is going to be. Maybe you're terrified of storms and it's a terrible day for you. Or maybe you love storms and it was like an absolute surge of excitement. There's so many factors going on. And it's the same with astrology. And so the art of prediction can be very arrogant, and it's full of, I think, just classical hubris a lot of the time. Claiming to have special powers of prediction, I think is usually the wrong path. So in my work with clients, I absolutely talk about the future. I talk about the upcoming year. I talk about where planets are going to be transiting in terms of their houses and what those themes are, what the weather patterns are going to be. But I do my utmost to emphasize their choice in the matter, their free will, and also the flexibility of interpretation, the flexibility of interpretation. And in my own life, I've made some really wrong predictions, like hilariously wrong. Like, one day Andrei and I went out to a party and Jupiter was going to cross his midheaven. So I was certain that it was going to be a great night. And it turned out not to be such a great night.
that wasn't a good night at all.
What happened?
I got a DUI.
I have to, I'm flashing on, this thing, I did that interview with Substack and they were asking me like, what's the one thing that, people don't understand or get wrong about astrology? And I said that they believe it can predict the future.
Yeah.
And I talked a little bit about that, but I said the nut of what I said was that reality seems to really balk at being cornered, like put in, so a prediction is like, okay, this is going to be, and then reality's like, I don't think Jupiter going over the midheaven is going to be a really good night tonight.
No, I mean, in the long term, it was a good night because I cleaned my act up, but I had to pay. I ended up paying like tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees, and we're cleaning up trash on the side of the freeway for 6 months.
Yeah.
So, it was, in that sense, it was good because I got the whole time I was doing, work labor, I got to read the work of Swami Vivekananda, and I learned a very hard lesson in karma yoga.
That's a deeper
and
philosophical position.
Jupiter expanded my philosophical horizons as a result of me really not taking seriously the opportunities that could have opened up with Jupiter crossing my midheaven, and instead choosing to get blackout drunk and behind the wheel of an automobile.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, keep in mind the word prediction and predicament share a very interesting etymology.
They do, yeah.
Huh. I did not think about that.
Yeah. Prediction, predicament. Anyway, yeah, it's a funny topic for sure. But I think so to the viewers, listeners, this isn't for you, this channel, because we won't be doing the and the big breakdowns of what all the aspects are through the month and then how to prepare for them and things like that.
No, we're going to be talking about the quality of time. That's how there's quantity of time, and we have that down in this age, but we have also quality of time, and that's what I believe astrology is good for, is describing the quality of time.
Yeah, quantity more
So
is like you got your
measurements
you
and,
got your new moon in Gemini checklist, and
but
like
there is a lot of value in being able to give words to and to understand more deeply the quality of the time that you're in. So that's everything from the hour to the day to the century. And astrology can definitely describe the quality of time. And it can
Right.
zoom in and zoom out, and it provides a tremendous amount of context in an historical sense. And it's really quite amazing when you use it for retrospection. It's quite amazing.
Mhm.
And that's the thing that I think really allows you to use it elegantly in the present moment, and even look at the future
Right.
and not make predictions, but assess and understand and see what's unfolding. Everybody can do this without astrology, but astrology really helps. It clarifies and it gives more language to describe what it is that is unfolding in the collective and even in our personal lives, but it requires a tremendous amount of humility. Like, you always get bitch slapped when you try to overdo it in your own life, like I just described. I predicted that day was going to be great, and I was
I
wrong.
actually got bitch slapped that day for
But
you on your
it
behalf.
wasn't fun for me either. And then I've
I
also
am not driving when Jupiter's on my midheaven. I'm telling you guys that right
Yeah,
yeah, well, we were a lot
now.
younger.
Not going down.
yeah.
We were a lot-
Why are people, let's look at this, flip the coin.
Yeah.
What is the obsession with people for predictions? Like, what's going on in a person's life? Do they feel like unhinged? They're like,
Certainty.
Yeah.
I'm not judging, because God knows I've been in those places in life. Probably will be tomorrow.
Yeah.
But do I need to like run to the chart and try to screw something in place that is going to actually add more for me, more mental baggage, to try to suss out. I'll just say like this, like Rachel was talking about, like working with clients, talking about, I call it like trends, leaning towards the future or whatever. And yes, give the person some of my understanding of what the sign, the house, the transit's about, but really as a way to open up the poetry of their life.
Mhm.
So it's almost like talking to somebody about a dream, and then the dream language, amplifies it more for the person that's wanting to understand the dream. Just like with my client talking about the chart, and then they start to make the important connections within themselves.
Yes.
Not me, like, oh, well, Mars is going to be there, so you've got to and then it really has meaning for them because it's born out of their own guidance and their own understanding. But you help kind of prime the pump. At least that's how I work with the area of like the future or whatever.
Yeah, I think that I have had readings with you, obviously. That's how we started talking. Actually, I got a reading for Andre, and then I got a reading. And one of the things I remember that you talked about that was really helpful for me was you gave context for the sort of the descent of Saturn through the first quadrant of my chart, and it was remarkable how deeply I was feeling that. And yet I had been looking at so many details, so many smaller parts, that I hadn't really thought about it that way. And just actually that simple concept that you offered to me, like, Saturn's descending, and the way that aligned with how I was feeling and what I was experiencing, it was very edifying, because for me, it doesn't actually make sense until I actually could contextualize the way I was feeling, and it all of a sudden clicked into the greater narrative of my life. And then it had meaning, and it had its place, and it felt aligned, and it was no longer a point of resistance for me. So it's very much like a metaphysical massage, you know, like something in my energy field just like opened up, saw what was going on from that angle, was able to align with it, and it brought me joy after that point. So
That's always nice. Jeez.
yeah, and you were talking about time past, time future. It was looking back, it was looking ahead at this particular motion of a planet, and it's very helpful, and it is predictive in the way that I know that how long Saturn's going to be descending for. I do know that with certainty, but I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I am like very aligned with the journey now. So that's to me the real use, the medicinal use of watching astrological transits. And I'm lucky as far as predictions are concerned. Like I had, you know, one of the first astrology readings that I had was actually awful. And it really is one of the reasons I became an astrologer, like officially. I like my rite of passage or my initiation was actually getting a terrible reading from a really big, important, prominent person who shall remain nameless. And it was like, you know, an initiation because this person had such a reputation for being great, was super important in the scene. And by the time my reading was done, I felt so abused and mistreated because they had used my natal chart as a jumping off point to basically tell me that there's no hope for me in terms of growing financially. There's no hope for me to succeed in certain ways that were very important to me, basically fading me to a life of struggle, poverty, unhappiness. And at the end of that, I realized that my hobby of reading natal charts was actually more sincere. I didn't consider myself to be a professional. I didn't think of it that way. It was just something I loved to do and had been doing for years. And I gave readings to all my friends, and it was something I liked to offer at parties, and it was just my joy.
Mhm.
And I realized that even though this person knows more than me and they're more professional, I actually was a better reader because I know how to talk to people, and I would never use this information to make someone feel like that.
Right.
As though it's objective truth. And I was like, this is really ill and kind of not kind of totally toxic to take a conversation like that that involves somebody opening essentially, you know, their soul through the medium of this natal chart,
Right.
and make them feel demeaned and clipped and held back and less than.
Yeah, that's I'm really sorry that that happened to you. I just
No, it's good because it made me angry.
no, I
Yeah.
get it. I mean, it makes me think of I think it was Liz Green. I remember reading where she started to get interested in astrology, and then she went to work with this big astrologer in Boston. Her name was
Yeah.
Isabel Hickey. You've
Yeah.
probably seen her book.
I have
It's a
some of her books.
toxic book. I actually threw it in the trash at the supermarket one day when I was unloading stuff to take to the used bookstore. And I
Oh,
thought, you know, I don't really want anyone having to experience this book because there was so much of that kind of negativity and, you know, like etched in stone kind of faded things.
yeah.
But anyway, so Liz Green worked with her, and then all of a sudden, Isabel Hickey just completely cut her off and would
Wow.
never return her calls, wouldn't see her. And Liz Green was like, my God, what must have been in my chart that, you know, prompted this?
Yeah.
And that's how she learned astrology. She taught herself
Mhm.
so she could try to suss out what was going on. But those seem to be like rite of passages for a lot of people, a horrible reading
Yeah.
session, as I call it, like, you know, and then that's the opening there. That's the, you know, impetus that sets stuff spinning off in an opposite, you know, direction. So
Yeah.
it's a mystery kind of.
Yeah. I'm very grateful for the experience, and in like a kind of bigger analysis on the personal level, almost, there's conflict and drama, but on the bigger scale, I really see that person as being a tremendously important tool for my growth and
Well,
evolution.
I've seen that voodoo doll you have of that person, so I know I know what's going on. I'm kidding.
Yeah, so rite of passage is and it teaches you ethics, right? Because you go
Ethics, yes. Ethics. Don't make predictions and don't tell people things that you have objectively no way of, confirming in any way.
Right, 100%, and like if let's say you could read somebody's DNA code, and you had that knowledge and you could interpret somebody's DNA, you have no right, even with that, to tell somebody that they have no ability to do this, no chance of doing that. You don't know. DNA is also in motion. DNA is also flexible and plastic. DNA is responsive to its environment, to the stimuli around it. So we are not stuck or fated the way that these types of attitudes would have you think.
Right.
That being said, your DNA does make you a certain height, certain ability to see, certain quality of vision, certain acuities that you may be born with, certain talents and proclivities. There are some things that we have to work with, limitations. We have to work with time, space, and gravity as well, so there are limitations and restrictions on us, but those are also inspirations for developing and evolving very interesting characteristics, qualities, and gifts. So it's very dynamic, this push-pull between limitation and potential. And that's why nobody, not any astrologer on the planet or any genetic physicist, can tell you exactly where your limits are or exactly what you're capable of. Nobody knows. Only you can discover, so that's the kind of philosophical, ethical position that I was instantly granted when I had the experience of being mistreated by an astrologer, and it made me mad. And I always grow the most when I get angry, which is probably another reason why I'm calling this podcast Rage of Aquarius.
Yes. Definitely.
I get yeah, go ahead.
In a nutshell on this theme, I end up always telling clients or curious people or eventually students, you want to deep dive your chart, then you learn astrology yourself. You learn the language, you learn the historical origins, at least for Westerners. And you then go on that odyssey, because that's going to give you the kind of intimate connection that you're really, or some people are really looking for, like in a session with an astrologer. There's that archetype of the oracle and the oracle seeker, and it's fraught with a lot of potential problems. Because like you're talking about the vulnerability of somebody coming to a wise person, know-it-all, astrologer, shaman, whatever. And it's a precarious place to be in,
Yeah.
Right.
If I hadn't known, I did know my chart. That, thank God. I don't know what that experience would have been like if this was a completely mystifying, absolutely abysmal place in my mind. I don't know what I would have done. I don't know how I would have reacted, because I did start reading my chart first before I ever went to an astrologer. That's just how it happened for me. And I think that's partly because, astrology in my life, it was verboten. My mom is a Christian. And when I was growing up, she was super born again. That was a part of her paradigm. And she was really afraid of me getting into esoteric and occult things. And so I really wasn't allowed, I wasn't officially allowed to study astrology, which made it a forbidden fruit. So I studied it alone, and I'm an only child as well. So studying astrology was something that gave me a lot of excitement. It was quite a thrill, and it was very independent. It was very quiet. So I learned to read my chart like way before I branched out into talking to other people. And I totally agree with you. I don't think I would have had such a dynamic and inspired reaction to my rage if I hadn't already known my chart, and had like kind of a response or an answer to that. I could stand up for myself, essentially. Like, I didn't take it, although it did get under my skin. And that's when I really realized how, for example, when I was a school teacher, it's a little tangent, but it relates. When I was a school teacher, I deeply, deeply, deeply learned how much damage teachers do to students when they are young and impressionable, and then they are told by an authority that really matters to them that they're not smart or that they're incapable of doing something well. It leaves permanent scars that last all the way into adulthood, And there's something about, even as an adult, being in that vulnerable position where you open yourself up that much, it can leave a scar on your soul. Like if somebody actually says something damning or demeaning to you and you're that open and vulnerable to it, it can actually really mess with you. It can really fuck with your head. And a lot of times people are going to an oracle because they're in a state of insecurity. Not always, but a lot of times there's a sense of urgency or insecurity. There's a real lack of understanding about a particular area of life, and that makes you all the more vulnerable. So it's really very, very important to never go to an astrologer that you don't trust or feel safe with. Like, it's actually, I think, true of most situations, but you really don't want to let somebody look at your chart and commune with you about your chart unless you feel like you can trust them to not use it against you.
That's a great point. And I think that's one of the benefits of having some kind of I think, presence, say, in the community, or nowadays it's basically all on the internet. But a person can, by experiencing someone's writing or videos or whatever, get to see if they're jibing right with that type of person. Because I do think, of course, it's a mystery to me, but I remember I went to in Arizona some years ago, or New Mexico, I can't remember. There was a traditional astrology conference there. And, these were hardcore, like Ben was there, and Chris, and Demetra, the hardcore proponents. And it just blew my mind, the like blanket statements that were being made about, because they would put sample charts up or whatever. And I had to I hit a place within myself. I was like, okay, wow, this is understanding like what via negativa. This is not how I work, with people. And conversely, I had to honor that, wow, there's people that really use astrology, go to astrologers for that type of astrology, and it's their thing. They want, what's the word, kind of like etched in stone or hardcore pronouncements, made about this or that, or very event oriented, like getting specific events that they want to know, like, and to each their own. But it was that conference really clarified for me, in a more emphatic way, what I'm doing and the way I do it and the type of people I like to work with, which again are like people with artistic bents, not artists per se, but people that the X factor is a big thing for them, and they're, you know, in the Tao of things and moving with that.
Right.
So yeah.
I
What
had a
else is on our docket?
Oh, well, let's see.
I
We've
think we're in
actually,
our 5th hour now.
we've actually,
Kidding.
I think we've circled around and hit every point we wanted to hit.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about the segment that's going to be a regular?
Yeah, this
worst
is
astrology?
our tentpole segment.
Does it seem like totally hypocritical?
Yeah, well, yeah. Now, with all that said,
No, we are
Although
looking.
people have to understand that this segment that we'll be discussing, are we going to do it now, or is
yeah,
it?
let's do it.
Let's
Let's
do
do it now.
All right. So
So we're gonna do what is
Who's
it called,
gonna do it?
Rachel?
The worst astrology.
it's the worst astrology of the month.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
name of the segment,
yeah.
and it's a bit tongue in cheek.
Not the worst astrology ever, which is Rachel's natal chart, but
Or your Jupiter on your midheaven.
yeah, or the Jupiter on the midheaven. But yeah, just the worst astrology of the month.
No,
Okay.
okay, so this idea came about just as sort of riffing on these shows that are all over YouTube about people talking for hours about the aspects that are upcoming in the month. And I think it was me, I came up with the idea, the worst astrology of the month. And it's really to like look at what would be considered a bad aspect, a hard aspect that's transiting or will be, and you know, actually opening it up more than it being a negative or challenging, can't stand that word, but you know, like event or transit. So that's what this segment's about. And then I think Andrei's going to put the graphic up in the edit.
Yeah, I'll do
Yeah,
that.
great. So
For
we'll
the
have the
natal chart.
edit.
Yeah. Well,
All right. So we're looking at the solstice for 2022. So that's 21st of December, 2022. And what we have here is the sun at 0 degrees Capricorn, cardinal sign, in an exact square with Jupiter, who just re-entered Aries. at 0
Yes.
degrees. So that's a 90-degree angle. A square, traditionally, that is considered a hard aspect, meaning that it brings a lot of friction. It's not flowing or harmonious, and it's typically interpreted as something that's going to bring hardship. So, Frederick, what do you see?
Well, first of all, I love the idea just of Jupiter going into Aries, and I'll talk about the square in a bit. But that, I think, is something I just feel within the collective, like we're really ready for that, the joie de vivre vibe that I associate personally with Jupiter in Aries. Now, being square, the sun squaring that, so we should talk a little bit about like how astrologers put up the seasonal chart, solstice, equinox, right?
Sure.
And then the idea is that that solstice chart, December 21, is going to flavor the next 3 months, right?
Yep.
Okay, so with that in mind, the sun squaring Jupiter, I think traditionally that would be seen as, you know, egoic, narcissistic, the kind of, you know, jumping without thinking. At least that's the Jupiter and Aries part, whereas the sun going into Capricorn, that's wanting to start to like, you know, pull together. There's that tension, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So what's the alchemy when you have something holding itself together, wanting to solidify, and something wanting to actually kind of cut loose and blow up, you know, the atmosphere or whatever. I'll open that as the question and you guys jump in and then I'll add some things.
Rachel?
I feel like, it's kind of like when a truly great dancer knows all their choreography and is therefore restrained by the steps that they are meant to perform, but they put so much fire into it, so much passion, so much feeling, that their spirit kind of explodes through the choreography.
I love that.
Yeah, I feel like that's present here. There is restraint. There's it following some kind of tradition or some kind of memory, some kind of prescription, whatever you want to call it. There is definitely a path that's laid out or some kind of knowledge of what needs to be done. But it could be done with so much fire and so much passion and so much feeling that it will transcend anything that's just being phoned in,
Right. Well, and look, I mean, this is funny when we think about Andrei talking about I'm going back to this Jupiter on the midheaven, because that is sort of like Jupiter kind of into Capricorn in a way. But that very thing you were saying, Rachel, like the restraint, because apparently I guess Andrei ended up restrained.
Yeah.
But it had that Jupiterian, the philosophical, spiritual opening through you were studying.
And it was actually that night, on top of transiting my midheaven, it was also trining my natal Jupiter in Capricorn.
Oh, well, my gosh. That's a double dose of that theme then.
Yeah. So
I thought it was going to be a great night.
I thought it was going to, but it ended up being like, like Rachel just talked about, like, and you just said, where it was not, it was not like the first fuck, a lot of, from where I'm from, that would have been the first fuck up in a long line of a lifetime of fuck ups. But for me, it actually got to be it ignited a deep personal growth. And it actually was the personal growth that I was looking for at that time, because I had been floating through all of these different esoteric groups and, seeking answers and, doing, wild shit, wild shit, like, experimenting with different mind altering substances to a great excess at the time. And looking for something that was really going to, like you said about the sun in Capricorn, like bring me to my center and help me find something, help me find a path, find a direction. So that event did initiate me on a more serious path of self-development and self-overcoming.
Right.
So what
do I see? Yeah.
Category for this to fall under. For square Jupiter of the solar.
Yeah. Okay. So what do I see? I see what I'm getting is I'm getting that kind of like archetypal story of the square who needs to lighten up, and the wild child who needs to learn to settle down, and the misadventure they have on one night, the one night misadventure. I mean, this is like a classic like sitcom cliche, but like the misadventure where the square learns to lighten up and the wild child learns to mellow out, so or like I don't know, the Martin Scorsese film After Hours, where Griffin Dunn plays the kind of the working stiff who goes out for a night on the town and ends up like just kind of descending into the pits of hell in Greenwich Village, so there's we've got like the sun in Capricorn is this working stiff, and then the Jupiter in Aries is it's all the freaks and weirdos he meets that night, so it's his call to action, as we would say in storytelling, so yeah, that's kind of that's the feeling I'm getting here is, learning to, the Jupiter can teach the sun in Capricorn, when to put down his work, and the sun in Jupiter, the sun in Capricorn can teach Jupiter and Aries, why it's maybe good to have something that resembles a plan before you leap,
or how much a plan actually assists in, like what Rachel was describing as release and the ability to pioneer or innovate, or having that that base or that ground or container.
Yeah, one of my favorite film, we'll call him an auteur because he wasn't technically a filmmaker, he was a producer. Was from the 1940s. He was a Capricorn. His name was Val Lewton, and he saved RKO from bankruptcy after Citizen Kane. Which Citizen Kane right there, there's an example of Jupiter in Aries, which has just had absolutely no discipline, and it was just everything in the kitchen sink, it all groundbreaking, pioneering, innovative, but it bankrupted the studio. And so Val Lewton comes in and to manage the horror unit. And he's given these really cokey ass titles like Cat People and I Walked with the Zombie, the Ghost Ship and Body Snatcher, and these titles that were tested by audiences, tested by the marketing team with audiences. He's given a budget and he's given a schedule. So he's got to have the film under $100,000, shot in 2 weeks with this title. Otherwise, he was given complete free and creative license to do whatever he wanted with the stories. And they've ended up being some of the most they were the most revolutionary horror films in the history of American cinema. They really he for all intents and purposes invented the psychological thriller model, where we're not sure, is the character insane, or are they actually haunted by an ancient curse? And that and Cat People is one of the first truly psychosexual horror films that was made for a mainstream audience. So
it's a really great film.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, it's a really great
film. What I love about that film is, if I remember right, there's never any cats. It's just shadows.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Not even shadows and footprints and just a suggestion that there was,
I love that, because then it evokes your own imagination and that makes it doubly terrifying or scary, rather than it ploddingly put, here's the giant cat.
Exactly. I love Universal Pictures Wolfman that came out around the same time, but it's just, he definitely is a wolf, and here he is in his Wolfman suit, whereas the Cat People, we just watched it recently for actually it was on the solar eclipse in Scorpio. We got together with some friends for a movie night, and we watched that. And it really because they weren't going for the most obvious scares, they were able to develop a much richer kind of philosophical conflict between the psychiatrist and the vixen Irena, the cat person of the title. And that there were these, and my friend turned to me at one moment and he's like, this movie's really deep, because he thought that I was seriously just putting on some hokey ass B movie that we were going to make fun of. And he was really shocked at the depth that came through. And so that's what I really think is, that's what I see it. And it dovetails with what Rachel was saying about the dancer having the choreography, is those constraints that you actually can put on yourself creatively. As a writer, having a word count, having that you're needing a daily word count that you're meeting, and then a word count for the a total word count for your project, so that you're not just sitting there writing endless passages that, that just like that blow your, that just blow your own horn and really puff up your ego. So you're actually like, am I communicating a clear message to my reader? And I think it's a value. It's the worst for somewhat for it's the worst astrology for the fact that we just, with Jupiter and Aries, we're going to just want to look before we leap. But it's one of those conditions that we can really draw something monumental out.
I love that. That's great. I think that's a good way for us to end.
I think so.
It's like, I like that lilt to that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay,
So
so
anything, closing remarks to the viewers, like messages, or I'm getting a channeled message. No. I just want to reiterate, engage with us, and comments, suggestions, topics for us to go into, questions, outrages. This is Rage of Aquarius.
Yeah, personal checks.
Personal checks.
Bitcoin, Ethereum. I know the Lord is telling me that there is somebody out there who is having car trouble, and that if he sends and if they send us to an Ethereum coin, that car trouble will be fixed. So
oh my God.
And I would say to everybody too, the three of us are still working out the schedule for this. So we'll let you know when we're on again, but I think we're aiming for at least once a month, right?
I think that's a really good schedule.
Yeah, and then as demand grows and we just can't contain ourselves anymore, might be more frequently.
There could be special episodes. And so, this was the introduction. Thank you for listening. If you actually listened this far, that's amazing. And these episodes will become better and better as we develop this rapport and build the momentum. And next time, we're going to be actually diving deep into the Age of Aquarius, the Rage of Aquarius, the Aquarian era. Yes. And that's going to be a really deep and dope conversation. And it may not be the last that we have that's on Aquarius, but it's going to be the first. And we're going to break a lot of new ground in terms of talking about the pop cultural understanding of Aquarius, and the many ideas, theories, and feelings on the topic. We're going to cover it all,
including David Rolls, which we'll get into.
Oh my God.
He was a genius on that theme. But anyway, great meeting with you guys, and you guys out there and gals. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you.